Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us for today's webinar or for watching the recording on demand afterwards. Before we get started, I always do like to begin with one of my favorite little mottos. So if you've seen our webinars before, you might be familiar. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's lighthearted, but it is a great reminder that catching requirements issues early on makes everything just so much easier downstream. My name is Morgan Kostal, and I am your friendly neighborhood customer success manager. I help teams get the most out of QVscribe by giving them the building blocks for success through trainings, webinars like these, and ongoing guidance. Over the past few years, I've seen firsthand how QVscribe helps teams spot clarity issues, standardize language, and build stronger, more testable requirements. And with me today is Martin Fay. He is our awesome product manager. Martin oversees our full product line to make sure that our tools actually solve real-world engineering problems. He works really closely with all of our customers by listening to their feedback and turning it into practical improvements into our products, helping teams work smarter, reduce errors, and see measurable results. If you are new to QVscribe, it's a tool designed to help reduce communication issues, improve clarity, and ensure consistency across projects. Today, we're taking the next step in our journey, and we're super excited to introduce ReqWriter and show how it brings standard-aligned, human-controlled AI into the requirements process. So here's a quick overview of what we will cover today. If you were at our last webinar in October, you might remember Ron and Ron's team's challenges. So we'll have an updated story about his team and the new challenges they are facing now. We'll then do an introduction to ReqWriter, including a live walkthrough so you can actually see it in action. Then I'll pass things over to Martin for a little bit. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a quick Q&A for 10 minutes, and we'll see what questions you folks have today. So let's jump in. Some of you may remember Ron, as I said, from our last webinar. Ron is a project manager overseeing a complex program with all kinds of different team members contributing to the requirements. In that session, we talked about how his team uses snapshots and timelines to now make their progress visible. Before we talk about the exciting new stuff with ReqWriter, it's important to recognize what Ron's team already has in place. QVscribe. I like to think of QVscribe as the perfect combination of human and computer strengths. People bring the context, the experience, and the system understanding, and QVscribe brings the objectivity, speed, and consistency, all while applying best practices instantly. Ron's team faces challenges that many of us know way too well, vague phrasing, inconsistent terminology, and missing or conflicting information. QVscribe helps their team identify ambiguity, improve clarity and structure, apply ears patterns, standardize terminology, and maintain consistency across their documents. This foundation here is super strong. But today we're picking up where we left off with the next challenge that Ron's team is facing. With QVscribe, the team has become really good at identifying issues. They've built strong habits, and the requirements are noticeably clearer and more consistent. But now a new friction point has appeared. Knowing what was wrong is no longer the hard part. Rewriting quickly and consistently is. Different authors fix issues in different ways. Across shared documents, style and phrasing could shift from even section to section. And review cycles start to slow down, not because requirements are unclear, but because teams are starting to debate wording. At the same time, leadership is also starting to ask new questions about AI support. Could it help teams move faster? Could it do so while still following their standards? And authors were asking something similar along those lines. QVscribe's really great at telling me what's wrong. Can it help me fix it? Importantly, Ron's team's not looking for a chatbot to generate the requirements. They want guided rewrites that follow their rules, respect their terminology, and keeps humans firmly in control. So even with their strong requirement practices in place, three gaps have become pretty clear in their team. One, rewriting still takes time. Insight is super fast with QVscribe, but turning it into clear, testable wording still takes effort. Two, consistency is kind of hard to maintain at scale. Even with shared rules, the phrasing can vary and reviews do slow down. And finally, the hot topic in everybody's lips, leadership is asking about AI. But not to replace the authors, but to provide the help with the clear guardrails and transparency they need. This combination of needs is exactly what ReqWriter was built to address. So you might be wondering, what is ReqWriter? So ReqWriter is an AI-assisted rewriting and review feature built directly into QVscribe via QRA Cloud. It works hand in hand with QVscribe using the same rule sets, glossary terms, ears patterns, and quality score indicators you already know and trust. ReqWriter takes those QVscribe insights and something along the lines of here's what's clear, here's what's inconsistent, and adds the next natural step. Here's a clear, testable, standard-aligned way to phrase it. ReqWriter does not replace your authors. It supports them. It gives authors a strong starting point, reduces those back and forth reviews, and introduces AI into the process in a transparent, standards-aligned way, with suggestions you can always accept, edit, or ignore. ReqWriter fits directly into your existing QVscribe workflow. You review a requirement either in QVscribe for Web or Office. QVscribe analyzes it against your standards. And with one click, ReqWriter suggests a clearer, more testable rewrite. Then it's up to you. You decide what you want to accept, edit, or ignore. It speeds up the refinement without changing your workflow. All right, so this is probably what you're super excited to see today. Let's take a look at ReqWriter in action. And I'll use some examples pretty similar to the kinds of requirements that Ron's team works with every day. So I'm going to start with my first example, indoors, over here. So this is the exact kind of requirement that Ron's team sees very early on into the process, where they know what kind of behaviors the system needs, but they've captured way too much in a single requirement. So this requirement says the smart doorbell shall store configuration settings and shall retain them in the event of a power loss and shall restore them on startup. Over on the right here, we have that familiar QVscribe breakdown. It's the same guidance that Ron's team has relied on for years to understand where clarity breaks down and where testability can suffer. So let's take a moment to walk through some of these alerts together. Right now, this requirement has a 1 out of 5, and some pretty important issues stand out to me immediately. The first thing is the issue of multiple imperatives. So we have several independent shall statements combined into this singular requirement. The next thing is cross-referencing pronouns. So we have two instances of the word them, and this introduces ambiguity about what is even being referenced here. We also see that there is ears non-compliancy here. This is meant to be a ubiquitous requirement, but in its current state, it is not compliant. This here is exactly the type of thing that Ron's team encounters all the time. They understand, like I said, what the system needs to do, but by packing multiple behaviors into one requirement, they just end up making life harder for testers, reviewers, and downstream teams. Each behavior would require its own test case, yet the way the requirement's written, it prevents those behaviors from being independently verified. One thing you'll also notice on the screen here is that QVscribe highlights words like configuration settings, power loss, and startup as glossary terms. So this helps Ron's team stay aligned on the terminology as they refine the wording. So let's take a look at the suggest rewrite and see what ReqWriter suggests. to see how it will untangle this requirement. That was pretty quick, not to brag, but we see three much clearer 5 out of 5 requirements here. We have the smart doorbell shall store configuration settings. The smart doorbell shall retain configuration settings in the event of a power loss. And the smart doorbell shall restore configuration settings on startup. So now we can see that each requirement has a single testable imperative. Each behavior is now isolated, so now verification is much easier and straightforward. That cross-referencing pronoun them has been removed, so ambiguity has been eliminated here. But importantly, the intent is preserved. The structure just now supports independent implementation and testing. Like I said, that original meaning hasn't changed. We've taken that and improved on it. The system still needs to store, retain, and restore the configuration settings, but the requirements are now just easier to read, review, and validate. And just like Ron's team really appreciates, this right-hand panel still shows the rationale behind the rewrite. If you open up these different alerts, you can always learn more to get more information about this particular problem type and why the original scored so poorly and how each fix improves the quality. Nothing is hidden and nothing is treated like a black box. From here, the author has a couple of options. They can either copy all of these requirements, so you take all three of them. You can copy part of it, so by clicking this button here, you copy just that singular requirement. You can make further edits up here in the authoring view and maybe regenerate an example. Or you can decline the suggestion and suggest a brand new rewrite. It's important here that ReqWriter only suggests. You stay completely in control for what you want to do next. So that was Doors Next Generation. Let's take a quick look at the Excel version. So this is another kind of requirement that Ron's team writes all the time, especially super early on. This requirement says the smart doorbell should occasionally perform a self-check of the motion sensor, camera, and communication system. So this one also scores a 1 out of 5, and some of the issues are kind of familiar. First of all, we have no clear imperative, and that is because we have an optional escape clause instead. Should makes the behavior optional. We also have a non-specific temporal word of occasionally that leaves the timing impossible to test. Occasionally does not actually exist. We also have that same ears feedback I showed in the other version of QVscribe, saying that this is ubiquitous and it is compliant in its current state. We also see some super helpful glossary terms that we can take a look at the definition of to just make sure we understand the context of this requirement and when we look at the change. With this in mind, I'm going to suggest the rewrite, and there we go. We get this offer of the smart doorbell shall perform a self-check of the motion sensor, camera, and communication system every time interval. The improvement's immediate. We go from that 1 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5. We have a mandatory testable imperative replacing the suggestion, and that vague timing has turned into a clear, reviewable placeholder. And that placeholder is completely intentional. It's a reminder to go back to the team and define the actual timing constraint. ReqWriter is not going to have the answer for you for that, but it does make sure that you have that question asked internally and you can get to the bottom of it. The intent isn't changed once again. The system still performs those periodic health checks, just with hopefully a more defined time interval. And the requirement is just now easier to read, implement, and verify. If we accept this rewrite, we can go ahead and copy it to the clipboard. I can replace it in the cell. I'll reanalyze everything. And now we have that nice, clean 5 out of 5 quality analysis score. Success. Now, Ron's team can go back to the team, the rest of the folks, and figure out what timing constraint they want this to fall within, and also just move on to the next task that they have for the day. So, before we move on to the next part and wrap up the demo, I want to take a step back and look at what we just saw across the Doors Next Generation and Excel versions here. We started with some real requirements, the kinds that Ron's team writes and sees every day. Used QVscribe to pinpoint clarity gaps. And then with a single click, used ReqWriter to turn those insights into clear, review-ready wording. Across both examples, we saw two different types of problems, one a bit more structural and one more related to testability, but it resolved in the exact same workflow. QVscribe surfaces the issue, ReqWriter accelerates the rewrite, and the engineer makes the final call. Side by side, it's super clear how ReqWriter closes the gap between analysis and action. It provides a consistent starting point for improvement without hiding the reasoning behind each suggestion. Authors can see the why and see why the rewrite improves the quality and decide what to do next. And that's how teams move more quickly from this needs work to do this is ready without really changing their work. And with the zooming out, switching back to here, the real value of ReqWriter goes beyond the individual improvement of sentences and requirements. It gives the teams a more predictable way of refining requirements earlier, before reviews, test design, or downstream debates begin. By combining QVscribe's analysis with those guided AI rewrites, teams can move from insight to action faster while staying aligned to their standards and terminology. Instead of stopping at what's unclear here, ReqWriter can help teams confidently move towards requirements that are clearer, more testable, and ready sooner. So now I will stop and hand things over to Martin to take it from here.
All right, thank you, Morgan. Yeah, thanks, Morgan, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us today. Before I talk about how we're evolving ReqWriter, I want to briefly zoom out and talk about AI. AI, of course, is a very broad term. It covers a wide range of technologies, well beyond the large language models that are getting so much attention right now. And in fact, our products have always used AI. QVscribe, for example, uses natural language processing to evaluate the quality of requirements consistently, objectively, and at scale. And that's been true for years. So when we talk about responsible AI development, this is not a sudden shift for us. It's how we've always built products. First, we build trust methodically as we introduce new capabilities. And second, most importantly, we keep our customers and their goals front and center as those capabilities evolve. And so these principles, building trust methodically, customers front and center, become even more important when we're introducing a new technology like an LLM. So here they've helped us to define some core guiding principles or themes for how to develop ReqWriter incrementally and responsibly, while staying grounded in how people actually write, review, and use requirements. And at the center is a simple idea. People remain in charge. So ReqWriter is designed to collaborate, not to decide. Human authors set direction, apply judgment, and make the final call. So AI, it certainly helps with the heavy lifting, but authority stays with people. So the first guiding theme is faithful rewriting. And this means using all available information, no more, no less, and mostly no more. In AI terms, you often hear the term grounded in this context. Rewrites should improve clarity and quality, but should never invent information that wasn't already there. That constraint is intentional, and it's foundational for trust. Now, faithful rewriting protects against invention, but also highlights an important question. What other information should be available to support a high-quality rewrite? Of course, expert authors don't rely on a single sentence In isolation, they draw on context, like shared terminology, other requirements, domain knowledge, and so on. And that brings us to our second theme, enriched context. Enriched context is about helping ReqWriter make better suggestions by considering the same kinds of information an expert author would. Um, but even with the right context, there's still another important question, which is how does this actually fit into the way teams work, day to day and at scale? And that's why our third theme focuses on scalable workflow, meeting users where they already work. Um, Across all of this, people remain in charge. ReqWriter does the heavy lifting, but always as a junior collaborator. Now, these guiding themes, they're aspirational. They help align our development with the goals and day-to-day challenges that matter most to users. And our first release of ReqWriter is a modest but intentional first step on that journey. Now, thinking back to Ron and his team, this is where the questions become very practical. So let's now preview a few illustrative next steps within each guiding theme, examples of how these ideas could unfold in real-world practice. So starting with faithful rewriting, and a situation that Ron's team encounters frequently. An author captures the intent early on, but not all the details are there yet. So let's consider the requirement shown here. It should be possible to stop quickly. QVscribe would flag this for several reasons. It's vague, it's not testable, it doesn't clearly state what is responsible for stopping. Now today, ReqWriter can already rewrite this requirement in a clearer, testable form. For the missing time frame, we can see that ReqWriter does not guess. Instead, it provides a placeholder for how quickly the stop should happen. And we saw something similar in one of the examples that Morgan presented. Also missing in this example is the who or what are responsible for performing the stop. And in this illustration, ReqWriter also provides a placeholder for this missing actor. Again, faithful rewriting means using all available information, no more, no less. And where information is missing, the goal is to surface that explicitly and invite the human author to supply it. So a question that Ron's team might then ask is, can the system help me fill this in without guessing? And this is where enriched context comes into play. So Ron's team already maintains shared context. For example, a glossary of terms defined in QVscribe that reflect how their system is structured. Well, with that user-provided context, a future version of ReqWriter can go a step further. Instead of a blank placeholder for the actor, it can propose a short list of likely candidates. Now, these are not decisions, they're suggestions grounded in the team's terminology. The author can select one, refine it, or enter something entirely different. So ReqWriter helps narrow the choice, but the human still makes it. So once you can do this thoughtfully, for a single requirement, the next question becomes how to bring that same collaboration into the way teams review entire documents. So let's zoom out to see how Ron's team actually works. They're rarely focused on a single requirement in isolation. More often they're reviewing an entire document, dozens or hundreds of requirements with varying levels of quality. And today, ReqWriter is intentionally very focused on an author requesting a rewrite for one requirement at a time. And this makes sense as a first step. But at scale, admittedly, it would introduce friction. So within the scalable workflow theme, an illustrative next step is to shift some of that effort earlier. Now, instead of waiting for users to request suggestions one by one, ReqWriter could proactively prepare rewrite suggestions for all lower quality requirements across an entire document. And that way, when Ron's team sits down to review, they can move smoothly from one suggested rewrite to the next without extra clicks or delays. So the AI does the pre-work, but people stay in control of every decision. It's the same underlying collaborative model, just applied at the scale teams actually work. So when it comes to AI, we are all still learning what is possible and what works best in real day-to-day engineering practice. Um, and with that in mind, we're evolving ReqWriter with our customers. Teams like Ron's are helping us to test assumptions, surface real constraints, and keep things grounded in how requirements are actually written and reviewed. So if what you've seen today sparks ideas or raises questions about how this might fit into your AI journey, we would love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us to align our guiding themes to what matters most to you, to apply these themes responsibly as ReqWriter evolves. So please feel very welcome to book time with us and continue the conversation. Uh, and thanks again for joining us today. With that, I will hand things back to Morgan.
All right, thank you so much, Martin. Before we move into the Q&A, I just want to bring us back to the bigger picture again. Today, we saw how ReqWriter builds naturally on the way teams already work, helping authors move from draft to clarity earlier with less friction and more confidence. For teams like Ron, that means fewer review cycles spent debating phrasing, more consistency across authors, and greater confidence when requirements are shared with stakeholders. And importantly, ReqWriter supports decision making. It does not replace it. Your standards, your terminology, your engineering intent stay firmly in human hands. If there's one thing to remember, ReqWriter doesn't just improve the individual requirements, it strengthens the entire requirements process. With that, let's open things up for questions.
Thanks, Morgan and Martin. We did get a few questions coming in throughout, so it's always great to see lively discussion. The first one was back when you were first doing some of the requirement rewrites, Morgan, and it said, in the example that you used, does ReqWriter suggest a configuration, or how are the configurations determined, or is it more of a TBD kind of situation in the current state, and is there a future state when it comes to configurations and how those are incorporated into ReqWriter?
I'm not entirely certain if you mean the configuration of QVscribe or the configuration settings that I mentioned in the
The
example.
setting.
Okay. Um, Actually, Martin, do you want to pop in and answer?
Yeah, so the question was whether it suggests configurations.
Yeah, and if not, is it kind of a TBD when it comes to reviewing the rewrite?
Hmm.
Oh, I
So,
see.
okay.
Yeah, so the configuration comes into play indirectly at the moment, where ReqWriter, when it evaluates the, how what it came up with compares with the input, it'll make sure that there's an improvement. So there's some involvement that way. I think beyond that, I'd like to hear more, I guess, of what some of the use cases there. So I would say the person who asked the question would, reach out to us. I'd love to hear more about their use case or their goals.
I have
Yeah,
their information, so sorry to interrupt. I have their information, so more than happy to share that with both of you, and you guys can follow up after the fact and maybe dig into it a bit deeper.
that sounds great. And like it does put in a placeholder for some things that would be TBD. One thing I will suggest just while we're here is you could use the glossary feature and put in TBD as a glossary term as just a reminder that that is information that still needs to be determined and the next steps that should be taken. I think that's sort of along the lines of what you were asking, but at the same time, reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation to figure out how we can best support you. Oh, Yana, you're muted.
It's mine today if that helps with any of this. So what I was going to say is we had a couple come in and I think they're quite similar. So I'm going to jump to this one first and then I'll backtrack just if people are tracking the chats. Is there a limit in size of characters we can provide to ReqWriter?
Oh, that's a Martin question.
There's no hard cap, no. Yeah, I suppose, yeah. So the short answer is no. I'd say you could probably get, if you put too much into it there, I might start having issues. But um, yeah, let's try it. I would say try it.
Try to
There's
break it.
yeah, but there's no hard limit, no.
Perfect. I'm just tracking of questions too. So one of the other questions was, is ReqWriter included by default in QVscribe, or does it need to be activated separately?
Yeah, so that's a great question. ReqWriter is available exclusively in our cloud version of the platform called QArray Cloud. What I would highly recommend doing is my email is right there, morgan.kostal@QArrayCorp.com. Reach out to me and I'll let you know if you currently have access or you would like to gain access to ReqWriter.
Perfect. And we had a second question that was really similar to that one. So again, I have track of everyone that's asking these questions, and I'll make sure that Morgan and Martin can follow up with you guys. But the other one was very similar to, if I have QVscribe available in Word and Excel, should ReqWriter be available, or is it another license required? So very similar answer to, I believe, what Morgan just said.
Yeah, I'll just add to that is that with the web version, so Doors Next Generation that I showed, it is often updated right through the browser. So if you do have access, you'll probably see it unless you have to manually push updates. For Excel, you do have to manually update, so you might have access to it. You just might not have the most up-to-date version. So once again, reach out to me and I'll see what your access is like and send you the newest release if you need it.
Perfect. And then this is a question for you, Martin, and it was said that it might be a bit technical, so I'm just giving you a heads up, and future focus. But when it comes to the specific format required to identify the actors in the glossary, or are they identified by AI? So is there just a certain format that you have to put in for that to get pulled through, or is that something that the AI engine will be doing for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So I think the working model we have there is that no, the AI would do that for you. So you would not have to tag it explicitly. Um, and yeah, so that's just the short answer. And the longer answer really depends on, if that would be useful to have to help guide the rec writer. That's something we could consider. But I would say the starting notion would be that you'd have the glossary. That's a context you already have. Your team's already producing. The idea is not to, give you extra work to do. If that context is available to ReqWriter, it will do its best to propose suggestions from the glossary.
Perfect. And I know I'm just watching our time, so I think we have a couple more questions we can go through. I keep on saying this. We love getting as many questions as we are today. We're probably not going to get through to all of them. So I will make sure that there'll be follow-ups today and tomorrow and even early next week. And again, suggest booking that meeting with Martin and Morgan to dig in deeper. But the next one is, and I think probably something that's top of mind for a few people, is many of us have already, wow, I can't read. Many of us already have access to tools like Copilot or ChatGPT. So why would we use ReqWriter instead of those requirements rewrites?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Generic AI tools, I use them all the time. They're really great for general writing, but they don't have that additional awareness of engineering requirements. They don't understand things like errors and testability rules, or even things like the quality score indicators that we have in QVscribe that are catching potential problems or even your internal standards most of the time. RecWriter is purpose built for requirements. That's what it's for. Its suggestions are grounded in that QVscribe analysis and aligned with your standards, your rules, everything you want the requirement to take form in. And that makes it more suitable for requirements engineering. It's not just drafting text, which I use AI all the time. I get it, but you have to have something with more guardrails and more focus when it comes to something like requirements.
Perfect. And just one more question, I think, is what we can squeeze in. So I think this one's more for you, Martin, but does ReqWriter consider other requirements in the document when suggesting a rewrite? I know you kind of slightly touched on that, but if you wanted to dig in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So yeah, not today, but we plan to get there. So for our first release, ReqWriter considers the text of the requirement itself. Um, In the presentation, we kind of previewed the idea of additionally using, the glossary of approved terms for enriched context. Um, and then within the scalable workflow theme, we showed the idea of pre-computing rewrites over a full document of requirements. And definitely a natural extension beyond that would be to consider the full set of requirements when generating rewrite suggestions. So yes, that is very much on a roadmap.
Perfect. Well, we still have some questions coming in, so I'll make sure to send the follow-ups to Morgan and Martin. Again, we are recording this, so we will send that out early next week for everybody if you want to share it internally or also rewatch it. And if any more questions pop up, I'll also attach a couple of meeting links in that email. So it's a lot easier to kind of book those times right then and there. And if anything pops up, in the meantime, you have Morgan's information, you have Martin's information. I believe you also have mine from all the emails I've been sending everybody the last couple of weeks. So feel free to send to whoever's easiest. We really want to thank you guys for showing up today. And for anybody who's watching this on the recording, we really appreciate this. And our next CS webinar should be the end of March. I'm looking at Morgan and Martin for that one. But yeah, so thank you again. We're really, really excited about this launch, and I hope you guys are as well.